Hello class, welcome to Unit 5.1B, Solving Inequalities. So just as you saw yesterday, when we solve an inequality, it is just like solving an equation with one special rule. That rule is if we multiply or divide both sides of that inequality by a negative number, then we flip the inequality. So that's going to be important when we look at these examples. You solve it just like normal, where we are going to look, zoom in here to look at these problems a little closer. So if we subtract 5, so these rules are all things we've been doing to get ourselves started if that was an equal sign, but instead it's a less than. So here's the important step. We are dividing by a -4, so the first thing we should be doing is flipping that sign. So x is going to be greater than or equal to a -5. So then it's just a matter of making sure when you graph that we have, well, open dot because it's not equal to, and then anything that's greater than -5 is to the right. Okay, we look over here at this other problem here and say, first of all, I think this is supposed to be a -17, so please fix that. That way, if we add 17 to both sides, what that's going to allow us to do, oh, that's a 4, is x divided by 4, -2. Now, this one here, we are multiplying by a 4, so we are not flipping anything. Now, the only thing we're going to have here is -8 is greater than x. Some of you may want to look at this and say, well, that is x is less than -8. We can rewrite that. And if we do so, again, we're going to graph. So anything less than -8 going that direction. So you'll typically see that one as your answer. You won't see this one, but too typical, like on a test, just because they typically see that x come first. And most of you guys are better when we graph them. So just something to consider as you work through these problems. Okay, so take a look at solving these equations and graphing. So pause here to complete these practice problems. And then some of these problems you may have to extend your graph or kind of cheat them out a little bit. And I'll show you what I mean when we check them, because they might not fall in that -8 to 8 range. Okay, as you check your work here, you will see, especially in example 2, we kind of work through that problem and have x's less than -11. So we might have to just kind of add that into our graph to make room for it. If we solve 3 through 6, again, just kind of be cautious of a few things as you're checking these. First of all, 4, when we kind of solve through this, that gets way bigger than our graph. Probably some typo there, but that is what we're going to be looking at. So something that has to be greater than or equal to 64. 5, don't forget that when we get to that timesing -3, that we flip that inequality. Now, some of you guys, if we talked about briefly, you could rewrite this so that it's x is greater than or equal to -3, just to help with graphing purposes. All right, make sure we got closed dots on 4 and 5, and 6 looks good. And then, of course, with 7 and 8, these are those big fraction ones that we need to actually multiply by 4 first. No flipping of signs in 7, but in 8, when we have to multiply by a negative, we do need to remember to flip that sign. Okay, when we look at solving compound inequalities, first thing we need to do is solve them. Okay, then we're going to look at these, which our examples are already simplified, at least with the solving part. But then we're going to be looking at whether or not we have like a no solution, infinite solutions, or maybe can rewrite it to one inequality. So kind of take a second just to get your initial graph so we can talk about what's going on. So once we get to the fact that we have these graphs, the or and statements, it's really important to focus on what does or mean, what does and mean. If we're looking at x is less than -2 or x is less than 5, remember, it just has to be one of them. So when we look at saying x is less than -2, all of those values, -4, they're good. When you look at even like a 2, well, 2 isn't less than -2, but or is it less than 5? Well, yeah, everything's good there. So basically anything in that, -2 or less is part of the x less than 5. Now, anything that's 8 is not less than -2, and 8 is not less than 5. This is where we're saying that this area is no good. So we don't want to include that as part of our solution, but what we can do is say anything that's less than 5 would be our simplified answer. Whereas if we look at and, well, when you look at -4, well, -4 is less than -2, and it's less than 5. If you look at 0, that is not less than -2 anymore. So this is where we're frowny face and say, this part is no good. Well, if that's no good, 8 definitely does not include either of them, so that's going to be some more frowny faces. And what that's going to allow us to do here with our and statement is we need it to be less than -2 before it is both of them. Okay, same thing is going to kind of apply down here with our next one. When we start graphing these out, again, make sure we have that solid dot for a equal. But then it's got to say it's one or the other. Well, 5 is greater than -2, and it's greater than 3. 0 is greater than a -2, not greater than 3, but again, it doesn't matter because we're working with or. Now over here, this section is not going to satisfy either of them. So what we can say is as long as it's greater than or equal to -2, we satisfy one of those parts. And of course, anything that would be greater than 3 is also included in greater than -2. Now when we look at this and symbol, we need it to be both. So over here, that's automatically nothing. No good. 8, -8, that's not going to be greater than either of those. Now, even when we go to 0, that's going to be greater than -2, but is that also greater than 3? No. So this section here, when we talk about and, cannot be included. Once we get past 3, and we start looking at like 5 is greater than -2, and 5 is greater than 3, this is where we want our solution to be. So that's where we could say x is greater than 3. Okay, let's take a look at the other cases. So again, take a second just to fill in your graph so we can try to interpret them. Okay, let's focus on x is less than 5 or x is greater than -4. Well, at this point, you see these two solutions kind of heading towards each other. Well, if it's an or statement and we look at like each little section, if we pick a number down here like -8, is -8 less than 5? Well, yeah, that's going to be less than 5, even if it's not greater than -4. If we look at 0, something in between, well, 0 is less than 5. Well, it's also less or greater than -4, but as long as it's 1, we're good. And the same thing up here with 8. If 8 is not less than 5, or is it greater than -4? Well, it's greater than -4. So that means as long as it's one of them, we're good with our or statements. Now, everywhere on this graph is going to be a solution to one or the other. So this is where we could simplify this to say x is all equal to all real numbers. Now, when we switch up that word to an and we say, is the number less than 5 and greater than or equal to -4? Well, if we look at a -8, -8 is less than 5, but is it also greater than -4? No. When you look in this little area in the middle, and we look at a 0, is 0 less than 5? Yes. And is it greater than -4? Yeah, so remember, with our and, we're trying to look for like that overlapping area where it satisfies both. So again, if we look out here to a positive 8, well, 8 is not less than 5, so that's going to be no good. Even if it is greater than negative 4, remember, and means we need to do both of them. Now, technically, what you see up here could be a possible answer, but a lot of times what you do with these, if you remember, is we start at the smallest one, which is going to be the negative 4 is less than or equal to. Your x gets sandwiched in between and is going to be less than 5. So a lot of times you'll see them rewrite these to be a compound inequality where we get rid of the word. Okay, we look at this next one. X is less than negative 1 or x is greater than 7. So again, focusing on that word or, negative 4, that's less than negative 1. Even if it's not greater than 7, doesn't matter. Now, if we look at 3, we look in between here. Is 3 less than negative 1? Or is it greater than 7? Well, no. No good in between. Now, is an 8 less than negative 1 or greater than 7? Well, since it's greater than 7, both of those kind of work out okay. And really, that final solution is our answer. No way to simplify that one. Now, if we look at x is less than negative 1 and greater than 7, well, if we look here and say, all right, negative 4, well, that's less than 1. But is that also greater than 7? No. In the middle here, again, that's going to be a frowny face for both of them. If we look at that 8, that's going to be good for the greater than 7, but not less than negative 1. And because it says and, all of these are frowny faces. So when you see the all frowny faces, this is basically telling us a no solution because it is not possible to be less than a negative number and greater than that positive 7 all in the same problem. So typically what we're going to see is this and this. A lot of times those are our two most popular, but there are also some no solutions, the all real numbers, or sometimes we can simplify two answers down to one like you saw in the first 4. So good luck with the practice, take your time, and check your work. Pause here before you move on. Okay, so take a look, make sure we're first of all solving correctly. Don't forget to flip your signs. And then once we get those graphs, remember those or statements versus and statements. So double check a couple of them and make sure we're always trying to simplify to whichever one is more inclusive of the answer. Okay. And for the last ones, take a look here. We got those or statements. Going opposite directions. So that means everything is going to check out for at least something, one or the other equation. Now, when we got the and question, these x's you see here are kind of just taking the place of our frowny faces. We don't need to include those. Other than that, take a look at your answer and make sure you come to class with any questions. Make sure you finish up that Canvas practice for chapter 5.1, and we'll see you in class tomorrow. Have a nice day.